Monaco 64 here, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Friday, December 7th, 2018. A little early, a couple of minutes early, but I saw that a few of you are waiting. Nice to see everyone here. Sash Media, NASDAQ SC, David Morsili, Gary Croft, Hori Fumuyu in Japan, Laura. Hori says she'll have to watch the upload. She can't get the live stream. Hi, capitalism is key. Yeah, I'm not sure Hori is here, unfortunately. Mr. Uzer, it's a bit late for him. It's 10 o'clock in Bonn, in Germany, and he's tired. He's gone to bed. Hopefully, he'll watch the recording. Pablo from Canada. Luther 92, the Economist cover means nothing. I haven't got the world in 2019 here in the UK yet. I haven't seen that. I've seen the cover online, but I haven't really read the story behind it. Dan from Rotterdam in Holland. John Roberts, thoughts on Paris? Yeah, it's not only Paris, it's the whole of France, the protests. And I was looking at the French newspaper here, Figaro, and it looks like they're barricading Paris for tomorrow for more violence. The other outrageous thing I saw today, and I put it on Twitter, is a video of these police in France basically pointing guns at students in a school, high school, students on their knees with their hands up. It reminded me, I thought we're, watching reels from back during World War II when the Germans occupied France. I couldn't believe my eyes. So it's getting bad. Jazz rushing back from Tesco's to listen to me. That's interesting, Tesco. I've been to Asda today, Jazz, not Tesco. Yeah, the title of my video is Why Do Governments and Bankers Love Fiat Money? One of you guys asked me to talk about that, was one of the comments. That's how I decided on the title. And I think the best thing to do about that is to talk about why they hate precious metals, and then we can see why they also love fiat money. Let's see what the markets just did. They're just closed here. Gold has done well today. We traded up to 1250. That's the spot price of gold. I saw Silver Doctors a few hours ago said that gold traded above 1250, but don't forget, they're looking at the futures. I look at the spot price. Let's have a look and see what the stock market did, because my system now is gone unchanged because the market's closed. Let's see where the Dow, I think we were down about 500 points. It looks like the Dow finished down 559 points, or 2.2%. The NASDAQ underperformed, down 220, or 3%. So not a great day for the stock market. Federal Reserve, inflation is the true opium of the people, and it is administered to them by anti-capitalist governments and parties. I agree, totally agree with that. It was Lenin who said that, inflation and debauching the currency, printing money, fiat money, was a way to destroy, bourgeois society, or free market society. That was Lenin who said that. Yeah, Pablo, gold and silver are doing well today. We've broken some key technical levels. Silver's been able to break a recent high around 1955. Right now, silver is at 1455. Silver is right now at 1462. Gold is 1248.50. So gold's done well. Silver's done well. Gold looks very good. I've been talking about the 1235 to 1240 resistance, and we've broken through that quite easily today. Let's see what else. KVJQ says, I hope Strasbourg is all right. I love Strasbourg. Yeah, I think the major protests are in Paris, but I've seen that people are protesting everywhere. I've seen on YouTube. There's a guy called Central Intelligence Agency. He has a YouTube channel. He's a really interesting guy. He talks a lot about the Templars, and he travels, he backpacks and hitchhikes around France. And he was in Alsace, which is like south, not south, northwest, westish France. It's the so-called German part of France, Alsace. And he was there, and there were these yellow vests protesting there. Yellow vest for dogs. A Billy yellow vest. Yeah, Billy is here. Billy, come on. Say hi to everyone. Hello. Billy, he's always asleep. NASDAQ, where will oil prices go? I saw they rebounded quite a bit today. It looks like OPEC decided to cut production, but I think right now, 50 is the support, and just looking at round numbers, 55, the resistance. I'm not sure where they're going to go. NASDAQ. Yeah, cryptos are really bad. I mean, unless you really know what cryptos and the blockchain, are about, you're probably, bailing out. It doesn't feel good, but I'm holding on to it. James Samuels, what's good, Mario? South Carolina in the house. Yeah, it is a crazy day. I was looking at the, I was out when non-farm came out, where I was just going out. I went to the dentist today, just a checkup, and I saw that the numbers weren't great, even though we know these non-farm job data number are hypothetical and just a farce. It was 155,000 non-farm payrolls, was expected to 100,000. The average hourly earnings were 0.2, was forecast 0.3, and I think that's why gold and silver did well, because people might think, the Fed might not hike. But then again, the stock market should have done well, and it didn't. The one thing I noticed is the U6 unemployment rate actually went up from 7.4% to 7.6. So that's not a good sign. Most people will look at the headline unemployment, which was 3.7 as expected. Or it was just like the previous one. Capitalism is key, says, and the Fed. I agree. The central banking is not good. Yeah, I think we need to keep an eye on what's happening in France. It could it's quite serious already. We'll have to see. Kathleen Smith, watching markets close on the bubble heads are putting market down on tariffs. Couldn't be debt loads. They never mentioned corporate personnel on Earth. I agree, Kathleen. They're going to use the trade. They're going to call it the Trump trade wars, and they're going to blame him for the markets, dropping or crashing further. The reason the markets are coming down is because there is a credit bubble, with QE, zero interest rates, stock buybacks, and now the Fed is raising rates again, unwinding its balance sheet. And it's normal that we're going to see, they're engineering another crash. I mean, that's what the Fed does. But they can't, say that out. They don't say that. They'll use Donald Trump and the trade wars as the scapegoat, and the ECB as well. So let's I see there's quite a few people on right now. So let's go on to the subject, why governments and bankers love fiat money. And I did a little bit of research. I looked at two essays that I think you guys should, if you probably have read it, but I have read them as well many times before. But I read them again and I took some notes. The first one is by Congressman Howard Buffett in 1948. I think he spoke to Congress. And Howard Buffett was a congressman from Nebraska, and he happened to be Warren Buffett's dad. And his essay, his speech to, actually, I think it was, I'm not sure where he gave the speech. It could have been in Congress, but it could have been to like another organization. But it's entitled "Human Freedom Rests on Gold Redeemable Money." And I took a few notes, and he noted in this essay that when Lenin, Hitler, and Mussolini came to power, the first thing they did was outlaw gold ownership. And it's interesting that he didn't mention that FDR, that was the first thing he did when he came to power in 1933. But I'm not sure why he didn't say that. And he also says, in a free country, the monetary unit rests upon a fixed foundation of gold or gold and silver, independent of ruling politicians. So what I'm going to do with looking at these two essays, well, the second essay is Alan Greenspan's Gold and Economic Freedom. You will see why, they hate fiat money. Just looking at why they hate gold, which is the inverse of fiat money, right? And Howard Buffett notes that before 1933, the dollar was redeemable in gold. And he also notes that paper money without redemption is like feudalism. That's what Howard Buffett says. So is it any wonder that we feel, less free under, a fiat money system? Domestically in the US, you've had it since 1933. The UK's had it since 1931. And the world in general hasn't had, we've been under a total fiat since 1971. He says as well, and that's why they like fiat money, because they can manipulate a value, they can create value out of thin air on the back of your labor. He says your master can inflate or deflate the currency. Public is at the mercy of politicians and the bankers. I guess back in 1948, the bankers weren't as powerful, so we need to adjust some of his views. Fiat allows wars as well. That's right. So I'll keep going. I've written down some of the comments he said that I think are interesting. I recommend you just Google Howard Buffett on gold and freedom, and you find that essay. It says, under such conditions, the individual citizen is deprived of freedom of movement. He is prevented from laying away purchasing power for the future. He becomes dependent on the goodwill of the politicians for his daily bread. Unless he lives on land that will sustain him, freedom for him does not exist. So that's why I always tell people, having gold and silver, trying to get as much as gold and silver as possible will help you keep your purchasing power. And he says that here, it allows people to lay away their purchasing power. And back then, don't forget, 1948, it was outlawed to save in gold in the US. There were ways around it, like buying numismatic gold, but that is not really bullion. As I noted, he said that the fiat money gives politicians the power. He didn't say anything about bankers back then, but as I said, it gives the bankers the power as well. And another thing that I like to point out, because I've got some coins here in my pocket. I've got one actually. And I'll take it out. And it just goes to show how fiat money really steals from people in the stealth. It's very stealth, stealthily done, because it's over time. It steals a lot of wealth, even in the short term, I would say. But I've got here a 1904 $20 gold piece. Really nice piece here, $20. So it's just under an ounce of gold, because you needed $20.67 for an ounce of gold. But let's say, for example, that your great-grandparents had one of these and they had to hand it in to the Federal Reserve in 1933. And if they didn't, they'd be fined $10,000 and maybe even put in prison. So they took that to the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, let's say, your great-grandparents from Boston, and they got a $20 Federal Reserve note. And then let's say they went to sleep, like, what's the story? Rip Van Winkle. Let's say your great-granddad was Rip Van Winkle. He went to sleep. He had that $20 note in his pocket. He woke up today and he thought, wow, well, I'm going to go get myself quite a bit. And then he went to a shop and he couldn't even buy anything. But if he had this, he'd have $1,250 of purchasing power at least. So that's how they do it. They print and print and print, and the money becomes worth less and less. So that's why they hate gold as well, and that's why they try to keep gold down, because it kind of shows them up, their fiat currency. So let's have a look at some questions. I'll resume the essays in a minute about why governments and bankers love fiat or hate gold and silver. William, let's have a look. Dennis DeMenace, will the U.S. go to war to protect the status of the dollar as the world reserve currency? They could, but they would come out of the war, excuse me, with the dollar finished. Just like the British went into World War I and World War II, and after that, the pound sterling lost its reserve currency. They might well go, but it's not going to end well, I would say. What's the next government move to pump the market? NASDAQ asks. I'm not sure if there is a move for the next move. William Goins, there are a few things that are new. People are what's new. Blindness is universal. To hold your money in your hand, maintain good health, and have the means to protect yourself. That sounds like a good strategy. I mean, human nature never changes, William. Crypto just lost 5% in the last hour. Yeah, cryptos are getting hit hard, as I said. If you don't know what crypto and the blockchain is about, and you've put a lot of money into it in the last year, you're probably panicking and getting out. It doesn't feel good to see what cryptos are doing. And I have some cryptos, but I'm very happy with precious metals. I have a fraction of what I have in precious metals and cryptos. It's not really, it's not nice, but I can say that I actually bought some more cryptos just before I came on. Not that much, but I just bought a little more. It's hard to do that, because a lot of times, we tend to buy when things are high, not when they're here. And I've had over a year to look at what cryptos and the blockchain is, and I don't think this technology or idea is finished. This is just the price move, in my opinion. Of course, I still think the best track record for money is gold and silver. Good evening, Ben. Hi, Aesop's here. Nice to see you as well. Manuel, what's a good premium to pay on top of the gold price? I would say no premium. I'm just joking. You need to check where you are, and the premium can be 2%, 5, 10. It depends on the market conditions. You need to keep an eye on it and look at different dealers. That's all I can say, and try to get the best deal from the most reputable possible, of course. What's the deal with Brexit? Is May on the take from the ECB? James asks. I don't think the UK government has anything really to do with the ECB. The UK is not even in the Eurozone. We have our own currency, the pound sterling. So the ECB is not really anything. I think she might be, on the take from the City of London. I think Brexit is going to be. I think to be honest, they probably will have another referendum. Not that I think it's right, but that's what it's very confusing. So it's not going well. I think they've got to the 11th of this month. I think it's next Wednesday. That's going to be the vote on the deal that she did with the EU. And if that doesn't go through Parliament, then all bets are off. Kathleen Smith, a fat tail put option that never decays or expires costs about -1 per annum to carry, has no counterparty risk, no chance of ever becoming worthless. Yeah, that's a good definition of gold. That's good. Cyrus Kadrazar, party is over. Oracle, Mario, are we headed for an invasion of the 10-year US Treasury bond in the inversion? Sorry. We could. It could be even less than 6 months. Could be in 2 weeks. If the Dow drops 2,000 points next week in one day, we could see that happen. Capitalism is key. Did you ever hear of neo-cameralism? My friend is getting into it now. He used to be an anarcho-capitalist, but is now convinced of corporate government, Fiat included, of course. No, I haven't heard of that. Pablo, does that mean government and central banks love cryptos, or them it's another gold? I'm not sure, about governments and cryptos. I think, between sovereign governments, gold is still the only, it's the way to settle accounts. It doesn't, we are not under a gold standard, but why do countries, sovereign countries still have huge reserves of gold? They don't have huge reserves of cryptos. They might use the blockchain, technology in the future for their own currency or for gold. You never know, but they really need to become trustworthy again, which is a difficult thing. Dennis demands Ireland's central bank has refused to say if it plans to move. Yeah, I saw that headline. I saw that. Yeah, Gary Croft, that's right. 0.5% premium on the Glint card. I guess the only thing about the Glint card is that, it is your gold. It's physical gold, stored in Switzerland privately. But right now they are not redeeming it yet. You can't ask for delivery. I do have some Glint, but it's not really the real thing, but some people, and you can spend it. I mean, I look at my Glint app now, and the value of the gold I have is gone up quite a bit with the move. So, but I haven't spent it. Gary Croft is Tuesday the 11th. Today is a 7, 8, 9. So, yeah, that's right. Tuesday the 11th. That's right. Kathleen Smith, I'm having my 15-year-old son read the law. I told him when he is done reading this, he will understand more than 95% of adults how the world really works. I agree. And it would be nice, if these yellow vest protesters in France would read that book. It is written by a Frenchman, Frederic Bastiat, but you meet French people, and I've asked French people, well, have you heard, Frederic Bastiat? No one knows about him. They know about this new guy, Thomas Piketty, who's a socialist, but they don't know of Frederic Bastiat. I think, it would be great if more people in France read about Frederic Bastiat. Parlando, every ICO is its own central bank. They like to print money. A lot of ICOs, yeah, they're not worth anything. It's like the projects don't work out, but a lot of them are like applications. So some of them do provide something, and they don't force people to buy them. Central banks force, we are forced to accept central bank money, so there is a difference there. Sash Media 1, do you think we'll have a gold standard again? Actually, I do. It's the only way to bring the system back, because I think there will be a collapse. And gold, every time you look back in history, gold has saved the day. Hey, Subs here, do you think the Fed have been trying to keep markets inflated? Not really. I don't think so. Maybe a bit, but I don't think they want it to go back up. As I said, the Fed is a pump and dumper, and I think it's if they're going to keep the markets always elevated, we wouldn't have had the crash of '29. We wouldn't have had the bear market in the 70s. We wouldn't have had the crash of 2000, 2001. We wouldn't have had the 07 to 09 crash. So I think the Fed's going to you can't fight the Fed either way. When they're, pumping the system, you can't fight them. You got to buy the stock. And when they're reining in and taking the punch bowl away, you got to get out of the way or sell. R. Sanchez, where can one buy physical titanium? I don't know. You need to check that online. I've never bought titanium. Mizo Otero, would you buy real estate? Well, I own my house, which is real estate. Yeah, if I had to decide now to buy real estate or something or stocks, I would buy probably real estate, even though real estate would come down as well, because real estate is always there. It's bricks and mortars. Hi, Lord Humongous. Nice to see you here. So for those who have joined in the just recently, the title is of the live stream is Why Governments and Bankers Love Fiat Money. So I've been going through Howard Buffett's essay, Congressman from Nebraska, essay or speech in 1948. He was Warren Buffett's dad, of course, and he talks about human freedom rests on gold redeemable money. So, and I'm looking at why, also why government hates gold and bankers, and that's a way, why they love fiat. And one thing that I noticed as well is that he talks about how people with if you live on the land and you can grow things and you can be free because you can survive from the land. And then I thought about 1933 and the Great Depression or the banking collapse and the fact that the U.S. was still very rural back then. But after the Depression, after World War II, and after the fact that they banned gold ownership, a lot of people moved to, urban areas, to the cities, and it kind of makes sense. You kind of wonder if that was the plan, to get people off the land, to get people off, real money, to enslave them, and it makes sense. The other thing Howard Buffett says is that paper systems end in collapse. Irredeemable systems, of course, because you can have a paper, a gold standard, a redeemable system where you can redeem gold for free, gold coins for free at a fixed rate, and it's a paper system. It's the irredeemable one that doesn't work because it takes away the discipline from governments. This is the important part, and this is why governments hate, why they love fiat and they hate gold or silver. So I'll read here. He talks about the budget and paper money. So this is, I'm quoting him, says, there is only one way that these spending pressures can be halted, government spending, and that is to restore the final decision on public spending to the producers of the nation, to you, the taxpayer. The producers of wealth, taxpayers, must regain their right to obtain gold in exchange for the fruits of their labor. Yeah, the legal tender laws force people to use the Federal Reserve note. So this restoration would give people the final say-so on governmental spending, would enable wealth producers to control the issuance of paper money and bonds. And he goes on to say, because you might ask, how can they control government spending if you're on the gold standard? Well, I'll tell you why. How? He says, when the people's right to restrain public spending by demanding gold coin was taken from them, the automatic flow of strength from the grassroots to enforce economy in Washington was disconnected. So how does that happen? How can you prevent government from spending under a gold standard? Well, when you notice that government is spending too much, when you notice that the credit is flowing too easily, interest rates get too high, because bankers, when governments borrow under gold standard, bankers get a bit, suspicious, so they raise interest rates. So when you see that that's happening, you take your, when you think credit flowing too much and the government spending so much, you can take your gold out of the system, and that's how you do it. He says here, before 1930, so that's why, that's why they love the fiat money. Under the fiat money, with the Federal Reserve helping them, the government can just, there's almost unlimited amount of credit that they can create. And that's why, the national debt has gone up so much. That's why taxation is so high. So he says, before 1933, the people themselves had an effective way to demand economy. Before 1933, whenever people became disturbed over federal spending, they could go to the banks, redeem their paper currency in gold, and wait for common sense to return to Washington. So that's the main reason why governments love fiat money, because it allows them to buy the votes. Because under a gold standard, they'd have to raise money through taxation, and taxation is never popular. But by inflating the money supply, it's like a kind of taxation, because your money becomes worth less and less. It's a stealth taxation. So what else does he say here? Yeah, he says our finances will never be brought in order. And this was in 1948, and he was right. because we are now at almost $22 trillion. There was a headline, I think most of you probably saw it, that Donald Trump said to someone that, because they showed him the hockey stick projection for the national debt, and he said, "Doesn't matter, I don't care, because when it all goes nuclear, I won't be here anyway." So this is Howard Buffett says, "Our finances will never be brought in order until Congress is compelled to do so. Making our money redeemable in gold will create this compulsion." So that's there's no other way to balance the budget, pay off the national debt. The only way to do it is through discipline of the gold standard, unfortunately. Not unfortunately, but unfortunately for those who love inflation. And he finishes by saying the paper money disease has been a pleasant habit thus far and will not be dropped voluntarily any more than a dope user will without a struggle give up narcotics. But in each case, the end of the road is not a desirable prospect. So I think we're pretty much near the end of that road, even though it has been a long road, I would say. So that was Howard Buffett. He was a congressman from Nebraska. He was also Warren Buffett's father. Danny Djokovic, I think energy is the new gold. Just look at California. Every home will need self-sufficiency. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure. I don't think, you can't. I don't think so, because, something to be to be money, it has to be portable. It has to be durable. It can't be consumed, and energy is consumed. Gold is not consumed. That's one of the qualities of it. That's why it's money. The supply stays very constant throughout time. There's very little supply shocks in gold from new mining, that is. Kathleen Smith, I think Trump is smarter than people give him credit for. I think come January, he's going to pass big infrastructure projects in the US. Well, that's more spending. That's what Howard Buffett said that we shouldn't do. Is that really the way President Trump wants to go? I think that's the wrong way. More government spending, more deficit spending. It's not going to make Americans freer or the country great again. So not too sure, Kathleen. How much paper and ink do you think it takes to print 1 trillion notes? Well, I guess you could have one note and it says 1 trillion, so that's not much. Depends how many notes you use. The Germans did that in the Weimar Republic, didn't they? Lord humongous. Or Sanchez, slavery never left. That's right. There is an old saying, silver is the money of gentlemen, gold is the money of kings, and fiat money is the money of slaves. Chris Weiner, is student loan debt jubilee possible? Why not? God hates kings. Trump was big on silver while he was running. So let's see what the markets are doing after the close. Yeah, not much. Not much. Not much going on. But so the second essay or article I looked at in relation to the title of the live stream, which is why governments love fiat money, governments and bankers love fiat money, is by Alan Greenspan. I know he's a controversial guy, and he was chairman of the Federal Reserve, but he wrote this essay about gold and economic freedom in 1967. Some of you might know I went to the Mises Institute 20th anniversary in 2002 in Auburn, Alabama, and Ron Paul was there speaking, and he participated in some of the lectures, and we were in the same lecture at one point, and I went to talk to him at the end of the lecture, and I asked him about Alan Greenspan's essay, and he said that Alan Greenspan autographed this essay for him, and he asked Alan Greenspan, do you still believe in everything you wrote back in 1967? And Alan Greenspan said, yes, I do. And that was, he was already Fed chairman in 2002. And he told Ron Paul, of course, I still believe in everything I wrote. He said, but there is no political will for a gold standard. The people and politicians, so that was his view. So I still, and some people say, oh, Greenspan was a traitor to the sound money, freedom, small government. Maybe so, but if he wasn't Fed chairman and that famous, would we be reading his essay about gold and economic freedom? So maybe that's a positive. Maybe, he did perpetuate the system, but at the same time, by getting the bad publicity, he's brought out, this question of gold and economic freedom. So he wrote the essay for the Objectivist, which was like a periodical for, I think, the Ayn Rand crowd, the Objectivists, in 1967. One of the interesting things that he talks about is that money is the common denominator for all economic transactions. And he talks about, what money should be durable, divisible, homogeneous, has to be a luxury, and desirable. Why is that? Well, because humans have an unlimited desire for luxury, and that's why people love gold, and why it's money. When you hold it, you really have to hold a gold coin to realize that, and that's why I don't think energy is going to be the new gold, because it's not a luxury really. So that's how he starts out the essay. El Tomo S, thank you for the €5 super chat donation. El Tomo says, good evening, everybody. Watching Monaco whilst ironing my yellow vest. All right. Prepare for tomorrow. Allez les jaunes. Because in France, they say allez les bleus, right? When they're cheering for the French football team. But now you have to say allez les jaunes. So, and Greenspan in this essay also goes through the Austrian regression theory analysis of, how barter develops in a less developed economy, and people can use, bartering, of course, doesn't help specialization. And he talks, and I'll quote him here. I did take some notes. He says, in the early stages of a developing money economy, well, I guess it's an economy where you have indirect exchange, a money economy, several media of exchange might be used, since a wide variety of commodities will gradually displace all others by being more widely acceptable. So yeah, it's through competition. Whatever people find easier and prefer will become the money. Preferences on what to hold as a store of value will shift to the most widely accepted commodity, which in return will make it still more acceptable. Notice how it's a commodity. It's not a promise. It's not like a piece of paper forced on you by government. The shift is progressive until that commodity becomes the sole medium of exchange. The use of a single medium is highly advantageous for the same reasons that a money economy is superior to a barter economy. It makes exchange possible on an incalculably wider scale. So I found that really interesting reading about that, just how money evolves from an economy evolves from a barter economy to indirect exchange, and how through trial and error and competition, a money emerges. But it's a money that people value, and it's not a promissory note, right? What else does he say? I'll keep. Let's see. Let's take some questions now, if there's any questions or any comments. Chris, why not this usury-based fractional reserve poverty formula is working exactly as they always had planned? That's right. And the reason why it's worked, I think, is because academia, schools, the media, they've all been hijacked by the people who control this monetary system. They're so powerful. They endow the universities, they endow the think tanks, the CFR. So when you talk to the average person on the street, or even anyone on the street, be them average, very rich, poor, whatever, no one really understands. They think you're crazy when you're talking about these things. They think that money is that piece of paper, because they're not taught these things in school. That's probably why they hate people, the alternative, because we're looking back and finding out. I worked, of course, in the city of London for over 20 years, but when I started out, I was blind to it as well. I thought money was just that piece of paper, or a dollar, or a pound, or a Deutschmark. I hadn't been taught at school or university about the history of money, how they hijacked, the monetary system. And that's how, that's why we are where we are right now. That's why I do my videos, to try to wake people up. I think it's a worthwhile thing to do. Let's hope we make a bit of a difference. Hey, Chris. Thank you. Okay, what else does Alan Greenspan say here? And I'll quote him again. If all goods and services were to be paid for in gold, large payments would be difficult to execute, and this would tend to limit the extent of a society's division of labor and specialization. Thus, a logical extension of the creation of a medium of exchange is the development of a banking system and credit instruments, banknotes and deposits, which acts as a substitute for, but are convertible into gold. So what he's talking about here is that, yeah, if you're going to buy a house, and we are on the gold standard, and the system evolved, and instead of taking loads of gold coins, you can take a check, or a bank note, which is redeemable in gold. And that's what he's talking about. But of course, the bankers and the Federal Reserve have abused that. And he goes into that as well. He actually talks a lot about the Federal Reserve, how they abused that. And this was in 1967, before, of course, he became chairman 20 years later. So let's have a look here. So this is what he says as well. When gold is accepted as the medium of exchange by most or all nations, an unhampered free international gold standard serves to foster a worldwide division of labor and the broadest international trade. even though the units of exchange, the dollar, the pound, the franc, etc., differ from country to country. When all are defined in terms of gold, the economies of different countries act as one, so long as there are no restraints on trade or on the movement of capital. Credit, interest rates, and prices tend to follow similar patterns in all countries. For example, if banks in one country extend credit too liberally, interest rates in that country will tend to fall, inducing depositors to shift their gold to higher interest paying banks in other countries. This will immediately cause a shortage of bank reserves in the easy money country, inducing tighter credit standards and a return to competitively higher interest rates. So here he's talking about, an international gold standard and how it promotes trade. And that's probably why the governments and bankers don't like it either, because it actually promotes sovereign nations and trade. It doesn't promote globalization, actually. And he notes that we had that prior to World War I, because the gold standard we had after Bretton Woods was not really a pure gold standard, because it was only the dollar that was backed by gold, and all the other currencies were fixed to the dollar, and so they were indirectly backed by gold. So that's what he's talking about there, and that's why I think we will go, we have to go back to a gold standard internationally, and I think unofficially we had that up until World War I. It wasn't like an official gold standard, but it just worked because that's how it was. It was, what the countries did. The other thing he notes, and that's probably, why politicians and governments and bankers hate gold, is he says it was limited gold reserves that stopped the unbalanced expansions of business activity before they could develop into post-World War I type disasters. So what are the World War I type disasters? Well, they're like the Depression in 1920-21, the Great Depression of the 30s. Why did they happen? Well, because when the Federal Reserve was created, the U.S. was under a gold standard, but in the 1920s, the Federal Reserve was allowed to create money out of thin air, and that's why we had, we didn't have a pure gold standard, and that's why that happened, and that's why all like present crisis under fiat money system keep, the bubbles keep getting bigger and the crises keep getting worse, because there's no anchor. Under a gold standard, there are, of course, credit crises, but they don't get so out of hand. So the corrections aren't as bad. The recessions don't last as long. So I'm going to talk about another, how he criticized the Fed back in 1967. So this is what he says here in his essay. But the process of cure, that's the cure for the crisis, right? With the credit bubble. But the process of cure was misdiagnosed as the disease. If shortage of bank reserves was causing a business decline, argued economic interventionists, why not find a way of supplying increased reserves to the banks so they never need be short? If banks can continue to loan money indefinitely, it was claimed, there need never be any slumps in business. And here is where he criticizes the Federal Reserve. And he says, and so the Federal Reserve System was organized in 1913. It consisted of 12 regional Federal Reserve banks, nominally owned by private bankers, but in fact government-sponsored, controlled, and supported. Credit extended by these banks is in practice, though not legally, backed by the taxing power of the federal government. Technically, we remain on the gold standard. Individuals were still free to own gold, and gold continued to be used as bank reserves. But now, in addition to gold, credit extended by the Federal Reserve banks, paper reserves, could serve as legal tender to pay depositors. So there you go. The Federal Reserve was a step towards, how can I say, the fiat money system that we're now. So, and that's why uh, there's no point in trying to reform the Fed, nationalize it. It just has to be, how can I say, abolished. And we need to go back to the gold standard, sound money. So I'll look at some questions here. Jazz at Walmart, do you know anything about the UN Global Migration Pact? It is going to be signed by the UK 11th of December. Many countries not signing up. I think I've heard vaguely about it, but I don't know too much more about it. I've heard some people talking about it. It can't be any good if it's a UN pact. The long depression lasted from 1860 to 1890. Well, I guess, we had the Civil War, but I would say, and after the Civil War, but I would say that, and one of the reasons for that depression in the late 1800s was that they demonetized silver. I think that was one of the main reasons. Our Sanchez says the Belt and Road Initiative is bringing Europe closer to China. Trump is helping this effort with tariffs. Yeah, I mean, what about building a bridge or a tunnel from the Bering Strait to Siberia? That would connect everything. Uh, China has collected tons of precious metals. That's true. So does Russia. There's an article today on Zero Hedge talking about how even Goldman Sachs now they're buying physical gold, and it's for their house account, not for their clients. So that's interesting that Goldman Sachs is buying gold. Uh, so back to Greenspan. This is really interesting as well. And I've kind of changed some of the things he's not changed, but I've added on to it because this was in the 60s, and a lot has changed since then. He says, but the opposition to the gold standard is in any form from a number of welfare state advocates was prompted by a much subtler insight, the realization that the gold standard is incompatible with chronic deficit spending, the hallmark of the welfare state. But I would add as well now that it's the hallmark of the military industrial complex or the warfare state. So the warfare welfare state. You see, if the welfare state and the warfare state did not have access to unlimited credit from the Federal Reserve, they wouldn't be able to finance all their projects. They would be able to do some of them through taxation, but taxation is really unpopular, as we're seeing now in France. So it limits them, right? So that's why the governments and politicians hate fiat, hate gold, and they love fiat. And why do the bankers love fiat money as well? Well, because they get to deal in that fiat money. The more fiat money there is, the more fees they get, the more debt the government issues, the more, they're the ones who are the intermediaries. So they benefit from that. And they're nimble, they get that money first. They put it into hard assets. They know how to protect themselves, right? They're able to put it offshore, avoid taxation, and that's how the bankers have done it. And that's why they love the fiat money too. Why don't they love the gold or the gold standard? Well, because their profits won't be as big. So, what about Alan Greenspan's conclusion? So I'll read that, and then we'll start talking, and I'll answer questions. Well, let's see. Manolo has a question. 2 Manolo 3. Mario, what would happen if a small country like Switzerland went back to 100% gold-backed money? Well, I don't think they will, but they wouldn't be allowed. The Americans already cracked down on the Swiss in the 90s. They brought up all these charges about World War II. But yeah, a small country is more difficult. Look at what happened to Gaddafi. He was trying to issue the gold-backed dinar. Switzerland, I'm sure they would find a way to stop the Swiss. But unfortunately, the Swiss have been brainwashed as well. There was a referendum recently about buying back, backing their money supply by 20% by gold, and it didn't get through. So back to Greenspan's conclusion in his essay entitled Gold and Economic Freedom. He says, this is the shabby secret of the welfare statists, and I'll add warfare as well, tirades against gold. Deficit spending is simply a scheme for the confiscation of wealth. Gold stands in the way of this insidious process. It stands as a protector of property rights. If one grasps this, one has no difficulty in understanding the statists' antagonism toward the gold standard. So there you go. That's why they love the fiat money, because fiat money is everything opposite of what gold is. Gold is everything that's precious, honest for a monetary system. And that's why the politicians hate gold, love fiat. The bankers as well, even though the bankers know what gold is, they try to manipulate it, keep it outside the system, because they make a lot, they enrich themselves a lot more through the fiat scam. But we need to wake up, and not play their game, not keep our wealth with them, so they can use it to enrich themselves through their, fractional reserve system, paper money system. Swiss chocolates will be hit by 200% tariff. Yeah, the Swiss. Yeah, that's a good point. James Samuels, preach, Mario. You're doing a great job. Yeah, sometimes I think about the videos that I do, and I think, wow, I've become like a preacher, but more for the monetary system. I never thought I'd be, do that. Guido Trico, what needs to happen for you for short long-term treasuries? When we wait until next QE, we will probably already be late. Which film is that, Chris? Chris Gamer is saying, I'm going to watch that. That film has never been on TV. No, Blanco, I haven't seen these notes made out of silver by the Westminster Collection. Would you ever play the short game? Aesop's hair. You mean going short the stock market? I mean, or gold? I don't know. I mean, I've gone short instruments or securities by buying puts. Yeah. Some people argue that the best way to go short is to have cash. Because if the stock market is at 30,000 and it drops to 20,000, and you have cash, you've made, and then you buy this And that's another way to short, to have cash. You don't necessarily need to short the stock. You can, you can. The thing with shorting is that you have to borrow it, isn't it? I am short fiat money. That's right. And you know, this guy here, Franz Pick, who wrote this book, he's dead already. He died in the 80s, The Triumph of Gold. He said he'll never be, you always have gold. And that's, if I have some wealth, like, I will always try to keep as much as possible in gold. I will try to be, of course, at the moment, we still need fiat money to deal, to operate in the system. So I do keep some, but try not to keep too much. Kathleen Smith, do you think US dollar getting stronger story? What do you think of the lots of emerging markets that have debt in US dollars, need to pay back dollars and drive the dollar? Well, that's true about the emerging markets, but we already seen that, a lot of it this year. Look at the crisis in Turkey, in Brazil, South Africa, Iran. That's already happened. So, um, I made a video the other day about the dollar and the cycles, and the dollar, the top in the dollar was beginning of 2017 at 103.84, and so I think I don't think we're going to go back above that level for the next 5-6 years, because the dollar cycles are 8 to 7 years long. Our centers, the U.S. dollar is on its way out. Well, they'll call it a dollar. The pound sterling was the reserve currency and it's still around. It's just not going to buy as many things. The purchasing power will go down a lot, but people will still call it a dollar. I'm not saying it's going to disappear, and who knows? Even in 50 years' time, you could see the dollar rally against the yuan, just like sometimes we see the pound rally against the dollar, even though, it was the global reserve currency decades ago. Dennis the Menace, will the dollar ever go to parity with the euro? Oh, it has already been under parity with the euro. In the late 90s, early 2000s, 1 euro got down to about 82 cents. So it has been there already. So the euro has done very well this century. It went from below one. I know it went up a lot more and it's come down a lot from the top, but the euro has outperformed the dollar in the last 18 years. Yeah, so the dollar's already been below parity. The dollar's been below parity already against the euro. It could go there again. I think recently the lowest level for the euro was 105. I think it was last year. It must have been, end of 2016, beginning of 2017, when the dollar index topped. I mean, almost 2/3 of the dollar index is the euro. Yeah, I agree, Paul Anders. One turd measured against another turd. Yeah, that's why, when you talk about the strong dollar or weak euro, they're all fiat paper and they're all sinking, but sometimes some of them don't sink as fast as the other. Some of them come up for air a little bit before they sink further. So yeah, in the end of the day, try to stay away from the dollar, the euro, the pound, the yen, the yuan, and stick to real money, gold and silver. This is a nice coin, a 1962 half dollar. It's got the Liberty bell, and it's got Ben Franklin on the back. And I guess after 1964, they changed it to the Kennedy half dollar. But before Kennedy, it was Franklin. Dennis the Menace, should I plan a vacation to Europe? Why not? Europe is fine. Maybe not to Paris right now, but there's nothing wrong with Europe. One of my friends just sent me some photos. He just went over to Belgium, for the day. There's nothing wrong with Europe. It's a beautiful place, Europe. Very diverse, unlike, I'm not having a go at the US. The US is diverse as well, but, it's a bit more different. You go to a country, to Spain, it's different than France, different food, different language. In the US, the food is all the same. Um, so it's nice. This is cool. I remember you saying in the past that the Illuminati tried to recruit you or something like that. Did I? I don't think so. I don't think I said that. Let me try to think. No, I don't think I said. Kathleen Smith, US is nothing compared to Europe. Culture is everything. US culture is lacking. Well, actually, I like Europe, but I like the US too. I think it's US as culture. It's just different. It's just completely different. And that's why I like the US and I like Europe as well. The US, I like, maybe is a little too much sports and stuff, but I like that. I like baseball. I just like the U.S. as well. So, and I like the people. And I like the people in Europe too. Dennis Amez, how come you haven't picked up an English accent? I don't know because I haven't tried to change my accent. I just, maybe it's changed over the years a bit. I think my granddad, my mom's father in Brazil, he went to Brazil when he was really young, 15, and he was from Portugal. And Portuguese from Portugal is different, very different from the Portuguese in Brazil. But he never lost that accent, the Portuguese accent. So some people don't lose it. Sports and fast food. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, David Morsilli, too much sports to keep people's mind occupied. I agree. Even I agree with that. But you can still know about that and still like the sports. The sport that I only follow really now is golf. But before, of course, I used to follow everything. But hey, David, just I finished your book, by the way. It was interesting. David Morsilli, he's written a book, and it's very interesting. What's it called? Um, a loose end. I forgot the title. David Morsilli, you guys should check his book, A Loose End. It's for sale. Yeah, A Loose End. It's for sale on Kindle or on Amazon. I bought the Kindle and I read it. It's really interesting. It's fiction, but he talks about the history of post World War II, how the shadow government brought a lot of the Nazis to the U.S. And David's theory is that, and I think I kind of agree with him, is that Hitler lost the war on purpose so that the Americans would become friends with the Germans and fight the Soviets so that they could take over the US from within. And the way, the US has gone in the last 50 years after Kennedy was shot, you kind of wonder, maybe they did infiltrate the shadow government really well. So I recommend David's book. It's I think it's just over $1 on Kindle. So it's not going to break the bank, and it's interesting. Uh, okay, Kathleen, have a great weekend as well. See you later. Aesop's hair. Yeah, a few of you guys have asked me if I, said, "Oh, you should write a book." Yeah, I have. I haven't really, but I've only considered it because some of you guys have said I should. Maybe I should. Maybe just write a bit every day, almost like a diary. I used to keep a diary in my 20s a little bit, so but it wasn't like writing a book. R. Sanchez, Democracy, The God That Failed by Hans Hermann Hoppe. Yeah, I've got that book. Hans Hermann Hoppe. I met him. Well, I didn't meet him, but he was at that Mises Institute 20th anniversary, and he had a lecture there. Really interesting guy. Controversial ideas. He actually thinks that having a monarchy, absolute monarchy, is better than having democracy. And why does he say that? Well, because he thinks that uh, a king that needs to leave when the king dies or the queen dies, if they mismanage the country, their heirs are not going to do very well. So, but I don't know. Uh, Azure Sands. I just watched The Creature from Jekyll Island on YouTube. I was blown away. Have they actually come out with a movie? Because I've read the book. If there's The Creature from Jekyll, if there's a movie or a film, I will watch it. Is that a new one, Azure Sands? Is that a new film? That's right, GQZX. I always have difficulty reading your YouTube mnemonic. Yeah, that's right. Politicians now in democracy, they get elected for 4 or 5 years. They don't care what happens afterwards. Like Trump said the other day, I don't care about the debt. When it goes nuclear, I'll be gone. A king and a queen will think twice about that because their children and grandchildren will have to face the consequences. Aesop's hair. I have looked into the Article 13. Let's hope they get some sense in the European Union and they realize that it's YouTube says that the idea of Article 13 is good to protect copyright, but the way it's being implemented, it's going to have unintended consequences. So we'll have to see. Hopefully, it won't go through as it is right now. Mario, do you know what happened in the Huawei? I don't know how to pronounce that. Someone says Huawei. No, I haven't really looked closely into that incident. I saw today that apparently the bail for her was too big, so they had to, couldn't let her go. Not sure why she was arrested. Oh, so it's not a movie. They haven't made the book into a movie. Okay, I've seen that YouTube video by Edward Griffin, G. Edward Griffin. Uh, Blanco, do you still trade any markets? Sometimes I do, but not really. I'm not. Don't take it. The thing about trading is that you need to focus 24/7, and it's really hard trading. I've done well in the past trading, but I don't really want to do it. So sometimes I do put a little trade on, but not really. So I like to follow the markets. I do have long-term positions, but I don't do day trading. The other day, a friend of mine from the city, I used to work with him. I hadn't spoke to him in a few years, and that's what he does. He day trades, but that's not something I want to do. So I do have, investments and stuff, but it's more longer term. It's not really trading, I would say. The only little position I have now as a trading is I bought some calls in silver. They expire at the end of February. They're 18 calls, 18 strike calls. I didn't put too much money in it, but it's more of a punt. So if silver, really starts moving in the next month, that could do really well, that call. If it doesn't, I just lose the premium. Uh, KVJQ, did you see volume indicators in Forex? Well, it depends, because there's two. The foreign exchange market is over the counter. It's like banks trading with other banks, trading with their clients on the phone. So it's an over the counter market. So it's not published. So uh, but there are volumes like that the banks keep overall. I think $1 trillion a day that they trade, or something a year. But there's no official volume like in futures exchanges. Sash Media going off to the pub. Thanks. Have a good few drinks. Well, I have traded recently as well. Some of the airdrop tokens that I've gotten from the EOS project, because they can move about a little bit. So I've done a little bit of trading on that, but nothing huge. Mary, is it true that EU was started by Americans? James Samuels. Yeah, I think the CIA was behind, the European Union. They started out as the steel and coal agreement between France and Germany in the 50s. Because the CIA, and look at Papa Bush or Poppy Bush, who just died recently. He was the Mr. New World Order. He was Mr. CIA, wasn't it? So, yeah, and having a European Union, a single currency, is another step to a world order. So, yeah, I definitely think it wasn't the Americans, like you, but the shadow government, the CIA, I think was definitely behind the EU. They pushed the Europeans to do it. I don't think they were directly involved, but they kind of encouraged them. Azursons, can sound money be based on a basket of resources like gold and oil? No, I don't think so. Oil is consumed, so it's not money. Money has to be something that's not consumed because the supply's got to be there. Because if we run out of oil, we run out of money. We're never going to run out of gold because you can't consume it. So I think we stick to gold and silver. Silver is consumed, but it also isn't consumed. Chris, I haven't looked into that Renaissance Technologies. Dennis de Menace, is the common market still relevant? Well, the common market was one of the steps towards the European Union. So it is part of the European Union. They sold the idea of joining Europe in the 70s to the UK as joining a common market, but that was it, just a common market and free movement of people. But then they made it, and then in the 90s they made it into a political union as well. And people never voted for political union in the 70s. So yeah, the common market is still there, but it's become more than a common market. It's become a political union. J. Awuku, do you agree with Cliff High's estimate of Bitcoin going to 1250? I haven't seen that his prediction. I would say, you know, the high in 2013 was around that level, 1150, 1200. And from that level, I think we dropped to 197. So that was one of the big bear market in Bitcoin. So I guess if we could go and touch around that level, it's like the old high. He could be right. He could be right. I don't know how he got that number. Chris Weiner, I will have a look. Renaissance and Cambridge Analytica. Mercer owns Renaissance and Cambridge Analytica. Looter, do you think that 80s music sucks? That's interesting because I like 80s music because I was like, well, a teenager and in my 20s in the 80s. So I do like, I don't think it sucks. Do you think it sucks? Yeah, that's right, Chris. So, all right. I'm gonna call it a day. I gotta get up early tomorrow. I'll probably make a video tomorrow, but later in the day. So I wish you all a great weekend and a great rest of the day. To all of and any of you who are on the live stream here who are not subscribers, make sure you subscribe if you enjoyed the video, well, the content, and yeah. Wish you all a great weekend. Take care. Bye. And hopefully I won't have any problems uploading this.